Welcome to Wrasslin Raw!
Alright, you're listening to Wrasslin Raw, the podcast that takes you back to when Raw became war and Attitude ruled. Thank you for joining us. You're here with Ryan Arico.
Even Stu woke up for this one.
Brutal.
Joe Giammatteo.
No. Kane has defeated The Undertaker.
I'm the one and only Jason Bartlett, and we're going to examine WWE history 1 year at a time. That's right, folks. This is our 1997 year in review. And boy howdy, by God, what a year it was.
I don't know if you guys went back and listened to last year's, but man, we came out of some real just dark shit from the year prior. So yeah, it was something pretty special, 97.
Yeah, you can see the improvement over the years. We had 2 match of the year candidates in 95. We had 4 for 96 and 4 again this year. So definite improvement there.
Oh, yeah. Good call on going back and looking at 96. Just for comparison, as Jerry Lawler would say, there were enough dogs in that year to constitute a pound. So without further ado, gentlemen, let's get going with this. For our listeners, we're going to be talking about our Match of the Year candidates first. Ryan's going to be talking about the Jobber of the Year. Joe's got Observer Awards for us, highlights, lowlights of the year, and what we're looking forward to in 98. So, gentlemen, are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
All right, then. Let's get into it. Match of the Year candidates. I'm going to be going through these chronologically. So as the year progressed, this is the order that we experienced these matches in. First up, from WrestleMania 13, Bret the Hitman Hart defeats Stone Cold Steve Austin by knockout in 22 minutes and 5 seconds in a submission match, and that was with Ken Shamrock as the special guest referee. I started this with the video recap of the history of this feud prior to the match, and it really struck me at how tone-deaf Todd Pettingzoo was in his delivery of it. Like, it just really felt like Movie Guy would have been a much better choice. And the music, too. This was something that it felt like it deserved like an operatic or dramatic intro music. But instead, we had this schizophrenic jumping between styles. So, like, it was all a little bit dramatic. But then whenever they switched to the Stone Cold section, it was all of a sudden this, like, ZZ Top Texas vibe.
He's from Texas.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't fitting for him, but the ambiance was detracted from by it. But really, I just wanted to throw that out there because I thought it was funny. It was like a culture shock getting slapped in the face with Todd Pettingzoo.
He is a rattlesnake.
By definition.
It was also neat to see Ken Shamrock. That was the first view of the ring for this match.
With his painted on ref shirt.
Painted on. That was my exact note. By God.
And gassed up cannons hanging out.
My goodness.
It was also really neat to see the entrances for this. This match had a big feel to it going into it. This felt like a main event, even though there were 2 more matches left on the card after this. So placement on this match was, I remember us talking about it, a hell of a way to have this pay-per-view winding down, to have to follow this match. My God.
Get this match over so we could get to the Chicago street fight, please.
Right. Right. And the way this kicked off was really representative of the story they built going into this. These guys were all over each other like stink on shit. And even in the brief moments when they were still figuring the pace out, you could barely notice the hesitations. Like when Bret finally ran Austin's face into the ring post, Austin sold it immaculately, and you could see that they were working it out. They knew where they were going. I was disgusted to see Captain Lou Albano there in the crowd briefly.
Yeah.
But taking it into the crowd, that was a great move. Ordinarily, I don't like that as much. But at one point, Austin grabbed someone's drink and just exploded it all over Bret's head, and I fucking popped for that. I mean, this was great shit to see them out there, but being out in the crowd, it wore thin for me pretty quickly, mostly because of the fans. I'm glad they were getting their money's worth, but as a TV viewer at home, I wasn't, because I couldn't see the action. Everybody was in the way. It didn't last too much longer past that point, though. I loved when Austin went for the sharpshooter early on. Brett immediately reversed it and then just rammed a half a dozen rabbit punches into Austin's face. That looked and sounded stiff as hell. And something that was really coming across to me in this was the way that the space between moves maintained the pace. There were quite a few times where one of them, they'd hit their move, but then there'd be a few seconds between locking up again. And the selling in that few seconds made it feel very high energy, even though they didn't have hands on each other. What a way to maintain a pace without blowing everybody up. And honestly, I was getting annoyed at having to look down at my screen while I was typing notes. Every time my eyes dropped, there was a bump and a crowd pop, and it was non-stop throughout this match. Things took on a new dimension when Brett started working Austin's knee. When they're writing this story in the ring, the inclusion of the knee adds a few more pages for them to work with, and they were really able to flesh it out there. Austin working Brett with that steel chair, while Lawler and JR lost their fucking minds, was an amazing sequence from everybody involved. I had to force myself to stop taking notes and just watch, because I feel like I could highlight literally every spot in this match. Case in point, Austin's first submission hold on Brett. It was an armbar with a leg up on Brett's head and neck. It was a surprise. It was something I hadn't seen from Austin up to that point, and it looked fantastic. It even drew a concerned look from Stu Hart, for Christ's sakes. I did not care, though, for Austin's overdramatic setup of the sharpshooter the second time, before Brett reversed him. It felt like too much of a break from the pace of the match there. And once Austin got color and started dumping blood everywhere, the tone changed. It felt like Bret Hart was firmly in command in this match. This was his specialty after all, and it was assumed that Bret was the automatic master of the submission match. But here we started putting over Austin's stubbornness and resilience and refusal to give in. He was the perfect antithesis to submission here. Bret Hart selling the low blow reminded me of Hans Molman getting hit in the crotch with a football. I loved the way he sold it. He just clinched up and fell over. There was no overdramatic anything. It was like a real person got kicked in the balls. Finally, we got to the ending sharpshooter, that amazing scene of Austin pouring blood and screaming into the camera. Jim Ross painting that picture just like Austin was painting the mat. And Jesus, the amount of time we spent there just milking it. And Ken Shamrock, I mean, he shouldn't be ignored here either. He was great all through this, up to this point. But here especially, he was working it perfectly. He was right there looking for the submission. He wasn't being obnoxious about it, but he was being attentive until we got that submission. So guys, I have to say, the rest of the nominees, they have their work cut out for them, with me at least. I already voted for Austin versus Bret as a match of the year candidate last year, so it's not exactly surprising that this made the list of candidates for me, but when I hear the phrase pay-per-view main event level, this match checks each and every box. So, Joe, what did you have for Bret and Austin's submission match here?
Yeah, this was fun to watch again. This is our only match candidate here that was in the first half of the year, so it's been a while since we've seen it. We all got to watch this together in person, which was fun, and this second time around, it's just as fun to watch it again. Just a vicious match with a masterful story behind it. I mean, what more could you ask for in a wrestling match, in a professional wrestling match, especially on, WrestleMania? This was just a physical beat down on each other. JR was calling it a bar fight at one point whenever they were in the crowd, just beating on each other. I actually forgot that they went into the crowd until I watched it this second time around. But yeah, just beating each other to complete exhaustion. And the end of it was great too, because obviously, you get that classic shot of Austin bleeding, but the way that they went into the end was perfect, because they did that spot with the ring bell where Bret hits Austin with the ring bell, then he goes for the sharpshooter. So I like that setup. This is just it's a perfect match. I mean, as a standalone match, but it also has a story behind it with that double turn, because, Bret was getting cheers pretty much the whole match, but then he attacked Austin at the end and backed down to Shamrock. That's the other key part here, is that he backed away from Shamrock, and that got the crowd to instantly boo him. So great storytelling and just perfect match.
Yeah, for me, it starts off and I was kind of sad because, this is what I have always considered peak Hitman. This is him turning into heel Hitman, what I've always loved. I've talked about it for years. So it was sad seeing him here because even though the screw job was just a month and some change ago, it feels like it was forever ago at this point already for some reason. So it's just sad to feel like Bret the Hitman Hart is just so long gone. It made me a little bit sad to see it. Shamrock, that's another funny thing, is to see him as just the guest referee here. He's not really getting involved, and now we're praising him, talking about what a far way he's come in such a short amount of time, and he's already competed for the heavyweight belt once at this point, where we're at. So that's really hard to believe that he's come that quick. And Joe, you briefly touched on it. The thing that makes this match so great, the wrestling obviously is top notch with these two, especially with pre-broken neck Stone Cold. We have him at his prime right now as well. They come out here, and obviously Stone Cold, he was already getting some crowd support, but it was mixed when he came out. Bret, pretty much everyone was in his corner, but by the end of it, to be able to so masterfully pull off a double turn like this, I've never seen it successfully pulled off again after. I don't know if either of you have, but I've never seen anything like it. I mean, the storytelling is just, it's legendary for this match, on top of the ending of it with Stone Cold passing out from pain in a puddle of blood. It's like one of the most memorable endings to a match that you could think of. So the other matches, they have a tall order to go up against. This is the one we're starting with, So I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. This is the first one on our list, but it's going to be a tough one to beat.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sorry, I can't remember which one of you said it, but whichever one said that this is the first half of the year and we had such a huge gap between this match and the rest of these, the remaining three.
6 months. 6 months in between,
So strange to think of it that way, especially considering with the remaining 3 matches, just how much progress was made from the next match to the final match. I mean, it feels like that in and of itself, the storytelling over the course of about 4 months felt even longer, All right, let's keep it going to our next match. In Your House, Ground Zero, Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker ends in a no contest in 16 minutes and 3 seconds. So when I searched the cock for Ground Zero, Oppenheimer was the first fucking result.
Oh. It'll be a while before you get to Ground Zero if you watch Oppenheimer.
So I just thought it was funny because we were talking about it in our texting thread, and it's just the cock sucks for this. My God,
it'd be funny if you watched Oppenheimer and then at the end you got that little circle. It's like up next, Ground Zero.
Yeah,
there it is.
In case anybody's wondering, this is season 3, episode 5 of In Your House. God, I hate it. Once again, I had to watch some of the history recap because, like I just said, we've come so far from this point in our viewing, even though it's only a couple months. I couldn't remember what had precipitated this match. And once we watched it here, the lead up for me, it was pretty forgettable. But to be fair, where we ended 1997, just light years beyond this. So anyway, case in point, I thought this was a great way to highlight that when Commissioner Slaughter came out at the beginning to force Shawn back into the ring, because this is back when, Slaughter wasn't a fucking joke.
It was prior to boot camp.
Yeah.
Right. But when The Undertaker threw the referee over the top rope and out of the ring at Michaels, I started to remember why this match made the list.
That was a rough fall, too.
Yeah.
The first part of this, when Shawn was really milking the chicken shit heel thing, it still didn't grab me. The Undertaker, he was looking strong and powerful. There was a clothesline in there that looked fucking amazing, but it just really felt like Shawn was kind of just overplaying it. When the replacement ref came in and the bell actually got rung, and Shawn went after it, again, I started to remember why I ended up liking this match. And as much as I can complain about many other facets of Shawn Michaels, his actual ring work is, and almost always is, beyond reproach. It's just that whole begging off and running away thing. It doesn't work for me, brother, especially when Shawn does it. It's like it almost feels obligatory for him, or something that he's forcing himself to do. And, I don't want to ignore The Undertaker in this. The Undertaker, more often than not, felt like old reliable in this match. The steady, strong hand that wasn't always flashy, but was guaranteed to do what it needed to do. And I think he's the perfect contrast to Shawn Michaels, where Shawn feels like he was forcing himself to do things, like he was obliged to it. The Undertaker felt like he was doing everything he was doing out of a sense of correctness, because it's what ought to be done. Just, Shawn feels forced, and The Undertaker felt zen in this match. I did like Earl Hebner getting bumped twice, and then Shawn kicking him in the head, and then ramming his face into the turnbuckle. That was just great to see.
That's my pick. That's my pick. Spoiler.
I remember that being an automatic 5-star for you, I do believe. And that slow count that Hebner did a few minutes later was just brutally shitty. Thankfully, The Undertaker chokeslammed him for it, so that was good. And, for me, the best part of this match came after the bell, the final bell. And I'm talking the brutality of the triple team against The Undertaker, the flood out of the locker room to hold The Undertaker back, and of course, finally, The Undertaker sailing over the top rope to take out a dozen guys on the ramp. That was just it's still just hit me as amazing. The Phenom, truly. So this match, obviously already had some stiff competition, and I think I'll add to that. I think that this match, in the end, only really accomplished two things. It put over The Undertaker, but then again, I don't think he really needed it, but it also laid the groundwork for the Hell in a Cell, which definitely was needed. But I do have to remind myself that this was back in that whole rebuilding phase where we still had to call so many audibles in a row. The long-term booking was fucked for months. This was kind of a symptom of that. So I don't know. As good as this match was, I can't help but also see it as a product of its circumstances rather than a standalone work in its own right. So, Ryan, as our resident asshole for The Undertaker, let's hear from you first here.
I would agree that it just doesn't feel, I don't know, maybe like the buildup was as grand for this as it was for our other matches. But the action that we got was very much deserving of Match of the Year, I felt. It started out kind of cool to see the video and the pre-Kane teasing of Paul Bearer. That was kind of cool to see, going back and seeing that. Also seeing DX kind of formed here, but they're not DX yet. They're just kind of Shawn Michaels with some people that he's kind of calling friends right now. So they're not quite there yet either. One thing that's funny about a Shawn Michaels Undertaker match is they're probably 1 and 2 with the longest entrances. So when they wrestle each other, like you look at the menu and you're like, well, it's going to be about a good 15, 20 minutes before this match actually starts. And, we're going to have that twice tonight. That was kind of funny to see, but I was happy that extremely fake house, that set is at the top of the ramp, because to me, when Michaels went up there beating on the door to get out, and then Undertaker just slams him, and then Michaels does the reverse Dickie Murdoch down the ramp. I'm laughing my head off.
It's like
I know
slapstick
Bartlett,
comedy.
It is. Bartlett, you said you didn't like the overselling. To me, I like slapstick. It got me chuckling, so I enjoyed it. But outside of the comedy, once they did finally ring the bell, I think this is just a really good example of a David and Goliath match at its best. We saw Shawn with Sid at times, and, Shawn was able to get a good match out of Sid. The difference there was Shawn had to goat that good match out of Sid, where with The Undertaker, he's given a back tick for tat, which made this match just even better. What really put this match over for me, though, was when the locker room out back empties to try and hold The Undertaker back, the Sultan comes out in a pair of gym shorts and a tracksuit jacket. But of course, he still has the mask on. That was just golden. cherry on the top for me. I guess the storytelling maybe isn't as strong in this one, but I felt both of these guys put in a hell of a match, and I think it very deserving of at least being on this list for match of the year.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. You know, I'm going to actually gush. I'm going to pull a Vince McMahon impression here and gush over Shawn Michaels on this match. First off, his entrance was just, it was amazing. There was all of the extra gyrating and the suck it and the dick sucking motion he was doing with his hands. And then this is the one with the pyro botch in the ring, and then he does like the jerking off gesture. I loved this entrance. It was fantastic. And Shawn Michaels, you know, Mick Foley gets a lot of credit, deservedly so, for always putting his body on the line, taking huge bumps for people to, you know, help put them over. If Mick Foley's number one, I think Shawn Michaels is number two, because I mean, to me, he really, it has that horror movie feel to it. You know, The Undertaker is a specific character, and I feel like Shawn Michaels really complements it well. You know, he's that slow, methodical stalker style of wrestler is The Undertaker, and Shawn Michaels is just a great opponent for him, I think. And watching Shawn Michaels mainly when they were outside the ring before the bell rang, just watching him, he knows exactly where he is at all times. He takes quick glances, like when he takes a bump onto a table or something like that. You can see him take a quick glance to know exactly where he is. It's almost like a quarterback making a quick read, you know, surveying the field a little bit. And it's just really great to watch. And Undertaker just beat the living shit out of him in this match. And that's what you want The Undertaker to do. So I thought it was a great match. Watching it again, I gave it 5 stars originally. I'd give it 5 again. The only flaw I had in this was Sergeant Slaughter kept sticking his nose in at the beginning. But then when brass knucks are involved and DX comes down to like Sergeant Slaughter is nowhere to be found. So I thought that was a little bit of a flaw, but outside of that, this was a great 5-star match.
Yeah, good call on that too. The early signs that Slaughter was due to be neutered. All right, let's move it now to our next match. This is the September 22nd, 1997 Raw. Cactus Jack defeats Hunter Hearst Helmsley with China by pinfall in 13 minutes and 40 seconds, in a Falls Count Anywhere match. So this being an episode of Raw, we didn't have the build-up that we usually do on pay-per-views, but we did have Rhonda Shear's cleavage leading into it. Just wanted to throw out that Rhonda Shear is hotter than Sable in almost every measurable way.
And she's up all night.
Keeping us up all night.
The build-up that we did get leading into this match, though, was part of what made this match stand out to me. This is one of the earlier examples of embracing the faces of Foley. We had Dude Love on the Titantron, introducing Mankind, introducing Cactus Jack, the debut of Cactus Jack, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And I especially loved Mankind in the background saying, "You sure are eye candy for the chicks, dude." I loved the hell out of that. But it was easy to miss that the first time around watching it, because that was after Cactus had already launched into his promo. And just based on that intro alone, my nipples were fully erect before Cactus Jack had even come through the curtain. And to me, this was an immediate improvement on that last match, because Hunter, as opposed to Shawn Michaels, Hunter came out swinging before begging off. And when he was begging off, it wasn't in like that coked up, frantic kind of way that Shawn does it. It's like Hunter was stumbling with shell shock, and I greatly preferred that kind of begging off. I love the fact that Cactus opened up the concrete, but then immediately got reversed onto it. That made everyone look good here. And that's going to be the theme throughout this match. Of course, I can't ignore Chyna getting into the mix here. You know this is pre-boob job Chyna. This Chyna was nothing but muscles and silence and presence, and she looked amazing putting Cactus over that guardrail with a clothesline. Cactus throwing Helmsley into the security railing was also an amazing visual, because they took down an entire wall of railing. Like, if you really think about it, it's not that impactful. It's just kind of, you know, it is what it is.
It's a good visual.
But it's a great visual, exactly right. And the way that they worked it and sold it, it looked fucking amazing. Much like the WrestleMania match between Hart and Austin, this was non-stop. And by that, I I mean, even the brief rest spots were exciting and maintained the match pace because that brutality that they were selling kept you distracted. There wasn't time to get bored because you were still in shock from what you had just seen. And it's no surprise that Mick Foley is able to work this type of match well, but a big part of what made this match a Match of the Year candidate for me at least was Hunter. Arguably, this is the most brutal match he's had since entering the WWF. He was a natural in it. China too, for that matter. There was not a single piece of this puzzle that didn't just fit perfectly. As a matter of fact, this was the only match so far that I had to actually pause to make sure to get my notes in, because again, just like that WrestleMania match, every time I dropped my eyes to take notes, there was another bump and another pop from the crowd. China getting bumped in between Cactus and the ring stairs. What a shocking turn of events that was. And Joe, you've said it a couple times about how awesome it is that Mick Foley was willing to include China to that degree in this match. He was willing to put her over just as much as he was putting Helmsley over in the action here. And for me, this match hit a perfect crescendo in the finish, bringing out that table. It wasn't something that was pulled out from under the ring. It wasn't something that they made to look like was purposely left for them. You know what I mean? It looked like Hunter had gone back and ripped it out of the gorilla position, and it wasn't set up at the outside of the ring. It was set up at the top of the fucking entryway for every motherfucker in that crowd to see.
But it was
gimmicked. I mean,
it was a very gimmicked table.
The bendy table, yeah.
It was the piece of plywood put over two legs.
If either of them weighed 5 more pounds, it was going to explode.
It did explode, man. When that pile driver hit, though, it went to pieces. It looked great.
The way that the finish played out was perfect. You know, if I was going to be a nitpicking dickbag, this would be the one thing that I would maybe pick out in this match. I just feel like a double arm DDT would have looked better than the pile driver. But I mean, who gives a shit? You know, that's, like I said, that's nitpicking dickbag stuff. The icing on the cake here was China throwing herself onto the pile to try to break the pin, but it was too late. So all I'm left with is maybe just imagining that she was there to congratulate and thank Mick for a great match, because like I said, everybody, and I have that in caps, everybody looked good coming out of this. Especially when Cactus fell over and did the curly shuffle while doing the bang bang. I mean, you can't ignore that. And I do just want to tack on at the end here, commentary, JR and the King. I didn't really touch on them in my breakdown because of how much I enjoyed the match, but it bears noting how amazing they both were in this. You know, like I said, I focused on the action, but you can't have action become this impactful without the play call behind it. So full credit to JR and the King. So Joe, not only did we get a pay-per-view main event level match, but we got it on the mid-card of an episode of Raw. These guys had something to prove, and they fucking proved it. What did you think of this match?
Yeah, this is our only match from Raw. This is not just any episode of Monday Night Raw, though. This is Madison Square Garden. This is the episode where Vince gets the stunner from Stone Cold Steve Austin. And Mick Foley is a proud Long Island native. This was just perfect booking, starting with the video. That video with the 3 faces of Foley, that might be my favorite moment of the year. I just love that, especially for the time period. I mean, that's, not something they were doing very often. So that was really cool to see. And then just that crowd popping for Cactus Jack. I mean, he went through the 2 characters, Dude Love, Mankind, but as soon as they saw Cactus, you could just feel the excitement in the building. Talking about getting China involved, this just shows how smart Mick Foley is, because, he's starting to stalk her with that chair, and you could hear the crowd really, really pop for that. And then when she goes into the stairs, they pop again. So, that's just smart, getting her involved like that, knowing your audience, knowing what they want to see. The biggest compliment that I can give this match is that it's almost like we are fast forwarding 2 years, because this is the type of match that we're going to see on a regular basis.
I have like that exact note.
Yeah. I mean, what better compliment could you give 2 guys who just had that match? Amazing finish. These guys had full control of the crowd the whole time. And like I said last year with the match that we had last year that was on Raw, it's a shame that it was not longer and uninterrupted because, we had a couple commercial breaks and it was kind of short, they're strapped on time with a live show. But yeah, what a great match.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with both of you. Starting with the video, when I saw Cactus Jack, it's just not even just up in the video, the whole setting it up. This is the first multiple faces of Foley that we get, right? We were briefly introduced to the fact that they existed during the interview, but this is the first time we saw it. And then when Cactus Jack came out of the curtain with the garbage can in hand, I almost got goosebumps, that's how excited I got to see Cactus Jack coming out. And Triple H did a great job of, as Bartlett, as you pointed out, acting, afraid or shocked or, what the hell am I going to do? I'm up against Cactus fucking Jack,
Selling it like it's a completely different person.
Yeah, like it's a completely different person. Once the match actually started, the action, just the feeling, the in-ring storytelling that these two were telling, if it didn't feel like a pay-per-view match, it sure as fuck felt like a 98-99 Raw. This did not feel like a 97 Raw match. This isn't the type of shit we were getting quite yet. And Chyna's involvement, not only did Mick and her do a great job of being one of the very few guys that actually would sell for her and made it look impressive, but because of her getting involved, and I guess maybe that's what other people didn't get that Mick got, was it made him come off stronger, because now it was it was a 2-on-1 match. It was almost a handicap match that he won here because of Chyna getting involved so much. So it elevated Mick, allowing Chyna to get physical with him. It didn't bring him down in any way. That was fantastic. And then I loved the pile driver through the gimmick table that just exploded like it had a bomb strapped to it. And then they just crumble to the ground and Mick just gets the hand up on Try's chest for the victory. It's a great ending. And we got it on Raw. I have nothing really to complain about. If I did have to be a nitpicking dickbag, Joe, I would agree with you. The fact that it was kind of interrupted by a commercial or two and a little bit restrained on time. But man, these two guys really delivered.
Yeah. All right. Let's get it on over to our final match of the year here. In your house, Bad Blood. Shawn Michaels defeats The Undertaker by pinfall in 29 minutes and 57 seconds in the first ever Hell in a Cell match. Once again, I didn't care for Shawn Michaels at the start of this. He was all concerned about the cage being locked, even though this is exactly what he agreed to take part in. But JR did do a good job of putting it over as Shawn finally realizing what he'd gotten himself into, so that kind of made it better for me. Something that made this automatically better than their Ground Zero match was that Shawn didn't have any place to run to. They were forced to go straight to the action. And they did, and they were in it, and I didn't really get into it until they started to go outside of the ring. There's that little 4-foot wide section in between the ring and the cage, and that's where it started to amp up for me. Watching this match became kind of an exercise in context for me, outside of the context of the rest of the pay-per-view that this was in. This match, it lost some of its shine for me, if I'm being honest. And especially in the context of our other match of the year candidates here. It continued to lose shine looking at it that way. I didn't get truly impressed with the spot until Shawn gave The Undertaker a pile driver into the steel ring stairs. That looked great. And I thought Shawn beating up a cameraman was funny. I still maintain that was Tiger Ali Singh, especially with JR saying, "That man has a family."
Yeah, we apologize to that cameraman's family.
But I had a really hard time maintaining my focus with this. Again, as a standalone match, it just wasn't holding up outside of that context I mentioned earlier. When we got to the point of Shawn Michaels getting busted open against the cage, I couldn't help but compare it to Austin getting busted open in WrestleMania. Once they had gotten up on top of the cage, that did improve for me. We had an amazing camera shot from beneath with the blood dripping down through the cage onto the camera lens. That was fucking awesome. Shawn falling off the side of the cage through the Spanish announce table. That was very neat. It was a good spot, but it felt like just that, a spot. While it was it was brutal. Don't get me wrong. I was left comparing it to the brutality of Cactus and Triple H, which flowed and didn't feel like a spot fest. Cactus and Triple H, that match felt like a battle. This match started to feel like a series of motions to me. And just to kind of further highlight that point, I was immediately emotionally invested as soon as Kane came out. With Kane, we got to a story that I was actually interested in, because I was never interested in Shawn and Undertaker as an angle. We got that imagery of Kane ripping the door off his hinges, the stare down, the look on the Undertaker's face, even Vince McMahon's ridiculous, "That's gotta be Kane," was more exciting to me than the bulk of this match. And in the final scene of that segment, Triple H and Chyna, they're carrying Shawn out. And I couldn't work up much interest at all for that. It was just another match where Shawn gets carried out as an exhausted mess, pretty much like every other Shawn Michaels match. And, I said before, I'm not shit-talking his work. It's the booking. It's the angles that got us to this point and the bigger picture that drove the action in the ring that I felt took this down. So, guys, I guess really the thing which surprised me the most about this was how down on it I was without a shitty pay-per-view behind it. So, if you go back and look at the match card for this event, Bad Blood, the Hell in the Cell was preceded by Midgets, the Godwins winning the tag titles, Gang Warfare, and the fucking flag match with the Patriot. So I think after all of that starvation, even a can of dog food would look good. And, I'm not saying that this match was dog food, but I also can't help but feel that on its own, the match doesn't necessarily hold up for me. Ryan, please, what'd you think of this?
I mean, this might not be a boot camp match, but I completely disagree with just about everything you said, if I'm going to be completely honest.
I assumed you both would.
And I don't know if it's just your hatred of Shawn Michaels, because I can't understand how you could not be entertained by this match, because I'm not saying this is my pick of the year, but out of just pure entertainment, I think it was the most entertaining out of all four.
Oh, wow.
It was 29 minutes of The Undertaker beating Shawn from fucking cage to cage, leaving him a bloody mess. And for me, it worked. I mean, really, the only thing that I would put against it was we had Vince McMahon as the play-by-play guy, I mean, sure, JR was there, but Vince was doing the heavy lifting on commentary, and I feel like this just would have been much, much better if it was just the King and JR. It only took them a few minutes before they got on the outside and for me, started using the cage to really amplify this match, just a few into it. As Shawn's using it to climb up and accentuate his moves to try and hurt the bigger, stronger Undertaker. And then when they did finally get outside and get up top, this is before the Undertaker and Mankind Hell in the Cell. So that one obviously gets a little bit more extreme when they get up there. So maybe that's hard to look past, but man, I don't know. And then Kane. I mean, on top of a match that just had me on the edge of my seat the whole time, then we add Kane ripping the door off, finally confronting the Undertaker here and setting up what is going to be the next year-long story for the Undertaker. So yeah, to me, this is just a classic top-notch match that not only was the action good, but this created a match that we still have to today. I mean, this is the first time we had it. Yeah, to me, fantastic stuff.
Are you sure that was Kane?
It's gotta be.
Yeah, I'm in Ryan's camp on this one, no doubter. I mean, we go back again. This is the first Hell in a Cell match ever. We've never seen it up to this point. Not a huge fan of gimmick matches in general. I've never really been a huge fan of steel cage matches. I kind of liked them a little bit more when I was a kid, but this is a completely different structure. And I think that both guys utilized that structure as much as they could without one of them almost killing themselves like Mick Foley would do a year later. So, there was a lot of stuff inside the structure that was good. Undertaker was just beating the living shit out of Shawn Michaels again, like you would expect. If a guy like The Undertaker is going against a guy like Shawn Michaels, that's what you expect to happen.
Locked in a fucking cage.
Yes, the little guy to get his ass kicked by the zombie dead man 7-footer. So I just thought it was worked very well. I think these two have a chemistry like no other. I think that there was some substance to it because they did have that little issue at SummerSlam in August. And you have to get to Kane. So I'm not sure what else they could do to get to Kane. I think this was a pretty good way to do that. It also sets up Shawn winning this match, sets him up to go to Survivor Series for the title. So there was some story behind it that I think was good enough. Again, the use of the structure. This to me was a perfect match again. Going on top of the structure, it doesn't look that crazy from TV, but if you're in that building, that has to look insane for them to be on top of that structure and getting choke slammed and, power bombed or whatever it is they were doing up there. Like that's pretty insane. And also, by the way, Kane destroyed Earl Hebner when he broke through that door. So that is a highlight for me.
That's another notch for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the Kane stuff. And I don't disagree that this was the best way to get to Kane.
18%er.
Yeah.
I go back to my comment on the Ground Zero match. This was a victim of its circumstances. This was what they had. They did the best with what they had, but I personally don't feel like they had much. They got to Kane. That's all that matters. I loved that. And Ryan, something you said, Vince McMahon on the play call here, that's something that was also a problem with the Ground Zero match for me. JR wasn't even present for the Ground Zero match. It was all McMahon all the time for that one, and it just fucking drilled into my skull. Just the constant dick sucking. But anyway, we've got a pretty contentious finish to our roster here, so let's talk about our choices. Ryan, why don't you go first? We'll give our main choices first, and if we need to fall back on our ranked choices, we'll do so.
So I'll start off with saying it was tough for me between what I did go with and this last Hell in the Cell match. I almost went with the Hell in the Cell just because of what it meant, but in the end, it's tough to top the Stone Cold Bret Hart double turn. It's one of the most iconic matches in WWF history. What it does, the trajectory that it puts Stone Cold on to become one of the biggest superstars ever in the WWF. It's hard to not make it match of the year.
I had a hard time narrowing this down. These are 4 excellent matches. I think that there were 2 perfect matches in this group. And that would be the Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin and the Hell in a Cell match. But I went with the Hell in a Cell match as my number 1. And the reason for that is, and I might sound like an 18%er when I say this, but there is one tiny flaw with that WrestleMania match for me. Even Stone Cold Steve Austin has said this, that I did not like that it was a submission match because Stone Cold Steve Austin's finisher is not a submission move. I feel like that kind of weakened that match just a little bit because if you're watching a submission match,
gives Bret the edge there.
It gives him the edge, but you're thinking, like, what is Stone Cold going to do to win this match? What move is he going to put on?
The $1 Million Dream.
Yeah. That doesn't take anything away from it, but I did go with the Hell in a Cell.
Well, we are differing across the board here because, well, I mean, it should be obvious that I was able to narrow it down to 2 pretty damn quickly. But those 2 for me were very, very strong contenders against each other. I feel that they were both perfect in their own ways. Different circumstances, obviously. One's on Raw, one's in fucking WrestleMania. So, maybe not a direct apples to apples comparison, but because it was on Raw and because of the debut of Cactus Jack and because of all of the many things that I listed in my breakdown, I went with Cactus Jack versus Triple H on Raw as my number 1 pick. So yeah, I mean, we're stymied there. Ryan, what did you say was your second pick?
The Hell in the Cell.
The Hell in the Cell. Joe, what was your second pick?
It was the WrestleMania match, which I think that's our declared winner then.
Yeah, because WrestleMania was my second, so yeah, I didn't want to go there first because, like I said, I voted on Austin and Hart last year, But hey, man, whatever. I'm perfectly comfortable with giving Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin the match of the year for 1997. How about it?
Yeah.
Just as long as it wasn't the Hell in a Cell. I'm just kidding. I really didn't care.
As long as it wasn't a Shawn Michaels match.
Yeah. Anything to do with Shawn Michaels.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the real fucker of it, is that I appreciate Shawn Michaels as
It sounds
a worker.
like it. It sounds like it.
Yeah, sounds like you really do.
I appreciate the hell out of Shawn Michaels as a worker.
Of course.
It's just that his own bullshit behavior fucked up the booking around his matches.
Mm-hmm.
He shot himself in the foot as far as my vote is concerned. So I'm sure that he will die one day regretting that fact, but
It'll be on his grave if I just
Yes.
could have got that one vote from fucking Rob Bartlett's son.
Yeah.
one more Soma and one more vote. All right. So now that we've got that settled, Mr. Ryan Arrico, the president of the Carpenters Union, has a special presentation for us. Take it, Ryan.
Thank you, Bartlett. I do. This is the naming of our Jobber of the Year. So we had some long-time wishes of the Wrasslin Raw crew to join the esteemed Jobber Club, like JC Ice and Wolfie D of PG-13, Ahmed Johnson. We also had some unfortunate additions like Flash Funk. We also had our very first pay-per-view jobber in Bart Gunn at In Your House 13. But for me, there was a clear winner with a career record of 5 wins and 50 losses. Yes, that's a 10-to-1 loss-win ratio. Oof. A true, honest-to-goodness jobber. Say his name 3 times. Roy Raymond, Roy Raymond, Roy Raymond. I picked him for 2 main reasons. One, and most important, the man has been a consummate jobber, putting over superstars in the WWF since we started doing this podcast.
Yeah.
And reason number 2, and I'm going to pull a bit of a Barry Horowitz here and pat myself on the back, but if you remember, I didn't do Roy Raymond when he was first introduced to us a few years ago because I couldn't find any information about him. But this year, when researching him, I was able to find an interview that was scanned in and uploaded to the internet that he did for a Rhode Island small business magazine. Where he talks about his time being a wrestler. So to me, it was a gem. It was an absolute gem to find that magazine because the interviewer must have been pretty interested because he doesn't ask him about his security business at all. Always asking him his wrestling questions. So he talks it up quite a bit. Got to learn a lot more about him there.
It's framed on your wall.
If anyone would like to hear the full coverage of our newly crowned Jobber of the Year, Roy Raymond, you can find that in our March 10th, 1997 episode. Congratulations, Roy Raymond.
Wow. Fantastic choice. Every year, every year you deliver with the Jobber of the Year, and that's a great one there.
There's a very obvious reason why the jobbers of the nation have appointed Mr. Ryan Arrico president of the Carpenters Union.
Thank you.
Put some respect. Put some respect on Roy Raymond's name.
Yeah. And I love that you started off with say his name 3 times because as soon as you said that, I saw in my head that fucking Beetlejuice tights, the Beetlejuice unitard that he wore. Perfect. Once again, sir, you have outdone yourself.
Thank you.
Joseph. Now we're wrapping up 1997 here. We've given out our awards. Did Dave Meltzer and the Wrestling Observer have some interesting awards for us?
Yeah, they do their end of the year awards. Now, these are the Observer Reader Awards. These are not Dave Meltzer's picks.
Thank you.
So what we do is he gives the top 10 choices for several different categories. Now, I've really only focused on top 3 and WWF guys. So I'll give you a quick rundown there. Wrestler of the Year, Bret Hart was second place behind some Japanese wrestler that nobody cares about or ever sees.
I was just gonna ask how many of these awards are going to Japanese wrestlers.
Yeah, well, that one, Wrestler of the Year. Best box office draw. Stone Cold Steve Austin was only number 3 here. I just wanted to point that out because that's going to change. Feud of the year. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Hart Foundation was number 1. Number 3 was Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels. Tag team of the year. We will skip that once again this year.
As always.
Most improved wrestler. Rocky Maivia got number 2 there.
Oh, yeah.
Best on interviews. Sable was number 1. Just kidding.
I was about to just quit. I'm done.
That would be Stone Cold Steve Austin, number 1, second year in a row. The most charismatic. Shawn Michaels was only number 3 on this list this year. Stone Cold Steve Austin, number 1.
It's because he lost his smile.
Yep.
Yep.
Bruiser Brody Award for the best brawler. I have to point this out every year. Mankind, number 1 again. Mick Foley has won this award 7 years in a row. Most underrated last year was Leaf Cassidy, guys. That was 96. Yeah. 97, number 1. He's flashy. He's funky. He's the most underrated wrestler. Match of the year. The readers agreed with us. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Bret the Hitman Hart at WrestleMania 13, and the Hell in a Cell match was voted number 3.
So they did not agree with Bartlett, is what you're saying.
Right.
Continue.
72%.
Rookie of the year, Mr. Aguila was number 1.
Wow.
We've seen him.
Yeah.
That midget?
Aguila. No.
Aguila, the guy that faced Taka.
Yeah, he was in the light heavyweight tournament.
Oh,
he was in
one of those dogs in the brackets.
Yeah,
exciting tournament. Yeah.
One of the
Don't
filler
forget about the
guys.
tournament. Come on.
The most important tournament of the year.
The best major wrestling card this year was Bartlett's favorite event of all time, Mr. 18% himself. The Calgary Stampede was number 1. Would you guys like to hear some worst categories?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
Worst tag team, Godwin's number 1. LOD number 2. Oh, you guys are going to love this one. Worst feud of the year. Any guesses?
Los Barriquas versus DOA.
Bingo. Bingo. DOA versus Barriquas. Landslide victory, number 1. Worst wrestler on interviews. Second year in a row, Ahmed Johnson, number 1.
Fantastic.
Worst gimmick. People really hate the new Gold Dust. That was voted as number 1.
The
Number
artist
2 was,
formerly known as Gold
Yeah,
Dust.
the artist formerly known as Gold Dust, number 1. Number 2 was the Truth Commission. Worst gimmick.
Okay, yeah.
And the last item I'm going to give you guys is the most disgusting promotional tactic of the year.
Brian Pillman.
The WWF has the top 5 in that category. Number 5 was Brian Pillman and Marlena Angle. Number 4 was the WWF's racial angles. Number 3 was the WWF promising Bret Hart and delivering a midget.
Oh.
Number 2 was the Montreal Screwjob, and number 1 was the interview with Melanie Pillman.
Yep.
And that is all.
Oh, thank you, Joseph. Entertaining, as always. By God. By God. I don't understand why people hate the new Gold Dust. I thought you were talking about like Dakota. Like they voted because of Dakota.
No.
Dakota is the worst part of the year.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen. So now that we're wrapping things up, let's talk about our highlights and lowlights of 1997. Ryan, why don't you give us one first here?
Well, my highlights, I'm going with the introduction of people like Kane and Ken Shamrock, both fantastic additions to the roster, but also the rebirth of other wrestlers into the superstars we know them as today, like Stone Cold, The Rock, and Triple H. They were all with us last year, but they are completely different versions of themselves right now. Also highlight Vince McMahon is finally off the goddamn mic. Low light, of course, Brian Pillman's death, the screw job, those are going to be low lights. But outside of those obvious ones, to me, one glaring low light is gang fucking warfare.
Yeah.
It was there all year tormenting us, and it still isn't fucking done heading into 98. It's still lingering. God.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, highlights are very similar to yours, Ryan. Debuts of people like Kane and Ken Shamrock. China, too. China came in February and has been great. And obviously, the big highlight is Vince leaving commentary. And not only leaving commentary, but becoming Mr. McMahon, too. I think that's a nice highlight.
We're not quite there yet, but at least he's off the mic.
Yeah, lowlights. Obviously, the Melanie Pillman interview was terrible. Shawn Michaels losing his smile was horrible and caused all kinds of problems. Yeah. And I also agree with you, Ryan, the shitty factions and the Patriot.
Ooh, I blocked the Patriot out. I even forgot that happened this year.
Yeah, so I'm agreeing with you guys on all of those. I'll add, though, as maybe like a counterpoint, gang warfare absolutely fucking sucks. But gangs, in terms of gangs, maybe, we made some serious progress with the Nation of Domination as a stable. I've always been a fan. There's no secret there. It had its ups and downs, most notably with Ahmed Johnson, but just as a whole concept, the Nation has been knocking it out of the park, especially in the early development of The Rock. So, that's up there. Kind of in that same vein, the ongoing build of D-Generation X. Taming down Shawn Michaels to keep him from fucking things up like he did through half of the year. Kind of putting a leash on him. Triple H is a little more slow and a little more steady. That's a good thing for everybody. And then again, like you guys have said, the development of more superstars, but this real fleshing out of singles. Because it felt like we only had like 2 good singles, maybe 3. For a couple years there. Now we've got at least a good half dozen, and we're building on that week by week to really boost the viewing experience. Now, I say that last because my very first lowlight is the fucking 4-year-long death rattle of the tag team division. It's just... It won't just fucking die. I thought with the Headbangers in there winning the championship this year, it would get freshened up a little bit, but that was just a swerve, bro. It went right back to being shitty. And hopefully we're changing that up with the New Age Outlaws in 97, but you know what they say, fool me 17 fucking times, shame on me. And of course, Sable. The increased focus on Sable. I can't stand Sable.
Oh, you're in for a rough 1998.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, though? With 1998, it gets better because we're going to add more divas to the mix to kind of dilute the silicon pool.
Well, I don't know if it's going to get diluted.
Yeah.
Well, it's not going to be all Sable all the time.
Yes, I'll agree it's not all Sable.
Right. So that's what I had for my highlights and lowlights. Let's talk about what we're looking forward to in 1998. Ryan, what do you think?
So what I'm looking forward to in 98 is Mr. McMahon Stone Cold feud. It's got to be first on the list. We get Stone Cold Zamboni this year. We get Stone Cold hitting Vince in the head with a bedpan. We get Bane 316 moment. These are all just iconic moments. But of course, I could not end my list without mentioning King of the Ring 1998 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Mankind versus Undertaker. Hell in the Cell. By God.
Yeah, I am looking forward to the continued development of The Rock, becoming the Rock character that we love, the one that we grew up on. I'm looking forward to seeing that. I'm looking forward to the return of Sean Waltman as X-Pac and the new look D-Generation X that's going to happen in 98. And, to go along with you, Ryan, there's just more development of Mr. McMahon, including that scene in the hospital. But, I think it's important because Mr. McMahon essentially becomes the only solid heel that the company has,
Yeah,
and they're going to build other heels around him.
Mm-hmm.
Is 98 when the corporation is formed and we get The Rock joining the corporation and that kind of stuff?
Very, very end, like December 98, we get Ministry starting with The Undertaker turning heel. Yeah.
Yeah, so that development of Mr. McMahon and building other heels around it, I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, 100% agreed with that. The further development of Mr. McMahon was the top of my list, too. And just tacking on to that, development of DX, the development of the Nation, because that's all going to continue. It's stuff that started in 97, but it's going to continue in 98. The biggest thing for me on my list here is going to be continuing to watch the ongoing push of Ken Shamrock. They have been knocking it out of the fucking park with him. They really haven't made any missteps in bringing him in, getting him started, and pushing him to the fucking moon. And I'm looking forward to see, because these are all things that whenever we're teenagers, I never paid attention to. I never appreciated it for what it was. But now, in the spirit of the podcast here, hindsight, it is just blowing my mind how fantastically they are doing with Ken Shamrock, and I really look forward to seeing where that goes.
One other thing that I was just talking about at the very end of 98, we get Undertaker turning heel. We get a memorable moment in Stone Cold getting crucified by Undertaker. That happens in 98, and I can't wait to read in The Observer all of the angry mothers over the crucifixion. I'm really looking forward to that.
By God.
Yeah, I am very happy to be closing out 1997, not because...
We're on an uphill climb for sure.
That's right. That's right. It only goes up from here. This isn't relief. This is anticipation.
I could hear the mountain climber yodeling right now.
Yes. Yep. A fresh commentary booth with no Vince McMahon.
Yes. By God, I think I just got erect all over again.
Good thing you got those dark britches on.
Good thing you have a lot of sable to bring it down for you.
All right, that's it, folks. We are done with 1997. I want to thank you again for joining us. If you like what we're doing here and want to connect with us, you can email us at WRASSLINRAW. Just add @gmail.com to the end of that to submit questions or comments. Check us out on social media and on every podcast subscription platform. While you're there, don't forget to follow and subscribe to get every episode of Wrasslin Raw coming to you every week. Give us a 5-star review and tell all of your friends to tune in to the most long-lasting Monday Night Raw review podcast on the airwaves. Next week on Wrasslin Raw, we're going to take a look at the Raw that aired on January 5th, 1998, with matches featuring Flash Funk, Barry Windham, and many more. So, for Joe and Ryan, I'm Jason, and this has been Wrasslin Raw.